Good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are on this blue planet. So my name is Priya, Microsoft Security MVP, MCT, and Community Leader at Microsoft Hero. Uh, we are going to have one of those great sessions today. But before jumping into the session, I would love actually to go a couple of same as always, to code of conduct of the community and the Microsoft Learn. So I'll share my screen. So and the same as always, all of us, we are rely on Microsoft Learn. Great communication, great documents and contents that you can find there. And definitely you can be in touch with experts there to receive a lot of support. And don't forget the Microsoft Learn and Microsoft Community Hub, which is you find a lot of things. You can ask your questions and receive a lot of information from the experts. So a bit of the code of conduct, the same as that. So same as always, be friendly and respectful to everyone, listen to different opinions, and be kind and patient. So don't forget to follow us on the LinkedIn, YouTube, and Microsoft Tech community to receive the latest news and updates about our community and upcoming sessions. So we are very pleased to have today Anthony Porter, a cloud security architect expert on the Microsoft Cyber Services, who will present us the topic, which is involving a service that I'm honored to be MVP on, Security Copilot. But he's going to talk about automating Sentinel triage with Microsoft Security Copilot. So adding Anthony to the stage. Anthony, great to have you today here. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Great to be here.
Awesome. You are going to actually share very good story about the Sentinel and Security Pilot. Everyone just, I think, engaged to listen what you're going to cover today. So I'm going to bring your slides up. I'm behind of the stage. Let me know if you needed anything from my side.
Too easy. Thank you, Priya. Brilliant.
Yours.
Thank you so much. Yeah, look, g'day everybody. And once again, thank you for joining me. As Priya put it, whether it's morning or afternoon or even, the night where you are, I appreciate that you have come to join us here today. As Priya, explained, today I'm going to explore, I guess, how we can automate the triage process of Microsoft Sentinel using Security Copilot. So how I want this to essentially be is that whether you're just starting out in the security operations space or you're already deep in the trenches in that incident response area, this session is designed to be inclusive across the board. So I'll walk you through the whys, the hows, and I guess the real impact that it can bring through to your SOC operations or security center operations with that AI flow. I'll cover off things like what is Microsoft's triage process and why it actually matters. The role of Security Copilot in actually enhancing that analyst's workflow, how the Logic app can actually be that glue that helps automate that process end to end. And then finally, looking at that real world example and how that all ties together. So by the end of this, look, I hope that everybody gets a clear understanding as to how this can be used and actually give you some tools to start building your own automation and workflows. And how, I guess, this can start to become almost like a teammate in your team and not just a tool that everybody's kind of hearing and that buzzword that sits in the background. Look, a quick brief introduction. My name's Anthony Porter. I am a cloud security architect at Canon Business Services. Not just printers and cameras. We actually have a full business services side of things. So I sit within the professional services side of it. I have approximately 16 years, I'd say, checking the date. Yeah, actually about 16 years in almost a couple of days, where the last, I'd say 6 years of that has been specifically the Microsoft cloud space. Previously, before, I guess, moving into my current role, I was more predominantly focused on the Azure and infrastructure, working towards, things like infrastructure as code. Then obviously starting to learn and think about why do we need things like infrastructure as code and whatnot, which obviously kind of started to form my knowledge towards the security rationale behind it. If there was a disaster, being able to redeploy and whatnot. That in itself was intriguing enough to start really starting to focus towards what that security side of things would be. Then obviously transitioning into that security focused tech stack. And that's where I am today. I do run a blog. I finally brought a domain as of recent. That is securingm365.com, where I predominantly focus on endpoint management, the Defender stack, Microsoft Sentinel, which you'll hear today, and the Entra ID side of things. Where I post, I guess, most of my articles or lessons learned or project work that, everybody gets stuck on a bit of bits and pieces, or just genuinely tips and tricks or things that I don't think are potentially being utilized, or just ways to potentially do your job a bit quicker, a bit easier, because, everybody needs to learn from everybody. If you're looking to where I post outside of my blogs, it's my LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, always happy to have a chat, where I primarily will be focused on helping folk within, I'd say, public and private groups, mainly sporting that endpoint management Sentinel focus. But it's, once again, solely more focused around sharing my knowledge, but then also helping others when they need it. But once again, I appreciate everybody's time today. And I am really excited about getting into the following topic. Look, the agenda is pretty simple and sweet. Like to keep it that way as much as possible. Today, I'll be diving into the capabilities behind Microsoft Sentinel. For those unaware, it's the cloud native SIEM that is the Central Modern Security Operations Center. From there, I'll then discuss Microsoft Security Copilot and how it can be used to automatically enhance that investigation response. So it's not just, once again, that tool that you as an analyst or you can interact with, but actually something like an intelligent engine that can embed itself within your flow, potentially automatically without your knowledge. I'll walk through how this can be then used through a logic app. Once again, if you don't know what that is, I'll go through that. And why this, I guess, could almost be a more approachable, scalable, strategic way, rather than relying on that standalone or embedded security copilot experiences. I'll go through that as well. So whether, once again, you're new to Sentinel or you're just starting off with Security Copilot and wanting some information, or once again, you're deep into that automation, this session is designed to try and give you that practical, real world insight that you can take back to your security team and hopefully use tomorrow. But by the end, I do hope that you can understand how you could potentially go from greenfields to like a fully automated triage process, and why that logic app integration is probably the key that you've been, I guess, missing to be able to unlock that AI potential within your security team. So once again, for everybody is not in the security focused position, so just covering off some of the basics. Microsoft Sentinel, once again, is that cloud native SIEM and SOAR solution. So that stands for Security, Information and Event Management, and then Security, Orchestration, Automation and Response. Once again, that's a lot of big words. In simple terms, it's a platform that helps security teams collect, analyze and respond to security data across your digital environment. So Microsoft Sentinel essentially connects to a bunch of data sources across Microsoft 365, across Azure, across Defender, even your third-party, firewalls or your endpoint services and your identity providers. And it brings all of that telemetry into that one safe place. From there, that data would get analyzed. Sentinel would then apply things like analytic rules, threat intelligence, and then that automation layer to be able to help your security analyst team detect and respond to threats, faster and more accurately. So think of it as like a security command center for the cloud. It's scalable, it's intelligent, and it integrates itself within that Microsoft ecosystem. And once again, because it is cloud native, you don't have to worry about Azure infrastructure. It really does just scale with the integration itself with the other Azure services. Once again, so just, I guess, breaking it down, those who are not aware, Microsoft Security Copilot is the AI-powered assistant designed specifically for cybersecurity professionals. So essentially, it's built on top of the large language models such as ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, and then has been fine-tuned itself with Microsoft's, I guess, background security knowledge and that threat intelligence layer. So I guess, what does that actually mean? It means analysts can work on Sentinel incidents using natural language. So the idea is that if you're not, too savvy with it, or you don't know how to potentially ask a technical question, you can say things like summarize this incident, or what is the impact of this alert, or generate a KQL, which I won't get into too far of that, but generate a KQL query to investigate this lateral movement. Now, if you don't understand that, that's completely fine. The idea is that you don't have to understand it. You can use things like Security Copilot to be able to help you get information like that as well. So Security Copilot then would obviously respond with its context-aware, actionable insights, saving you time and reducing that cognitive load, because everybody knows some of these things can be very stressful in times. Once again, it integrates itself within that Defender stack, that Intune, Purview, and other security tools, allowing you to pull in all of that relative data into that one tailored response. But however, I guess most of these interactions to date are manual. Analysts have to initiate these queries. They have to interpret these results. They have to decide what to do next. And that's where this automation came in. So being able to then combine, I guess, Security Copilot with a logic app, where we can start to automate parts of that triage, making it faster, more consistent, and more scalable, is where this idea kind of stemmed from. So to use Security Copilot, I'm just going to go through some of those groundings. The idea is that to use Security Copilot, you do need to provision SCUs, or security compute units. So think of SCUs as like the billing and capacity model behind Security Copilot. So similar to how you might provision compute resources for like things like Azure virtual machines, it's no different. It's essentially the compute behind the AI's use. So the idea is each SCU represents a unit of AI processing power allocated to your environment. So the more SCUs you provision, the more concurrent workloads that Security Copilot can handle. And so that in itself could be, somebody over this side summarizing incidents, somebody over the other side generating queries and starting to build on your knowledge potentially, or even just being able to have it in the background assisting you with that investigation. The greatest thing about SCUs is its flexibility, once again. So in recent times, they've really improved in that space. So you can scale it up and down, once again, based on your needs of your organization. There are no long-term commitments. It's, you can turn it off and turn it on if you do need it to, which can be awesome for pilot or testing, which, if you are looking to give this a go, you would be able to say, proof of concept, this is how much it's going to cost, and then turn it off at the end if it's, not yet where you'd want it to be for your environment. And then once again, it's billed through your existing Azure subscription. So you don't have to worry about licensing and so on. So it's all kind of within your Azure space. So the model itself makes it really easy to start small and grow, to be able to become like almost a part of your team, and at least, start to scale with that AI-assisted workflow. So whether you're planning to start, Security Copilot triaging straight away, that provisioning of SCUs is the prerequisite in this space. So everything that I talk about from this point with regards to the flow, there is that pre-assumed knowledge that in these environments, there is a SCU or a set of SCUs provisioned for this. Once again, just to round it off, that security orchestration, automation response, that SOAR component is what's built into Microsoft Sentinel. Now, what does that mean, right? It is essentially the that Sentinel can automatically respond to threats based on predefined logic, rather than waiting for like a human to actually take action and interact with it. So for an example's sake, if a user was to log in from an unusual location that, it hasn't really been around for much, Sentinel can trigger like an automation to be able to disable an account or notify the team. Or, simple and sweet, if the malware is detected on the device, Sentinel can go and automatically isolate the device where that malware has come from. And then, open a ticket within your ITSM tool. So something like ServiceNow. All of that has the ability to happen without your, interaction. So when security is at the foremost, speed is just as important. These, automation workflows drastically reduce the time, minimize human error, and free up analysts themselves to be able to focus on that more strategic tasks like threat hunting, which is essentially that proactive seeking out potentially something that's not yet a problem within your environment, or incident investigation, something has been deemed potentially an incident, or even just improving detection rules. So, reducing the noise. In short, automation helps SOCs scale, especially when you're dealing with high volumes of alerts or limited staff in your team. But now I'm not too sure if you're starting to see where these all align. But when you combine SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response, with Security Copilot, we're not just automating actions, we're almost starting to automate decisions. Once again, bringing it all back to, automation within Sentinel. It's referred to itself as playbooks. So a playbook is essentially a workflow. So a series of steps that can get actioned one after another, which then helps a specific condition, which can be applied, when there's like a specific condition. So like a specific alert or a specific incident is triggered within that Sentinel environment. So these can be things like sending a notification or enriching alerts with external data, triggering a remediation action like, disable that user or isolate that device, like I've just mentioned. Or once again, just that simple, being able to integrate itself with a ticketing system. So Sentinel, you don't have to always have eyes on glass on it. You can be doing things in the background, see an email pop up and say, oh, we've got an incident in this space. Let's go back and let's have a look. So once again, in that Azure ecosystem, a playbook itself is essentially built via a logic app. For those unaware, a logic app is a low-code or even a no-code service that allows you to design workflows visually. Now, I'm not going to, beat around the bush. I'm not the best when it comes to coding. I'm a bit of a use of Copilot to get to the state where I am. And then I often will use Copilot to try and help me debug things. But once again, the things that you'll see today, I've either found through Google or built and learned myself. So it really is, it's nothing out of your capacity and your ability. It really is just a bit of a learning curve. And once you start to nail it, you'll be running from there. So once again, if you've worked with logic apps, you'll be familiar with the engine behind Sentinel playbooks. Once again, there's a real beauty behind that. It allows security teams to almost codify their security response procedures. So making them consistent, fast, and scalable. So when we start to integrate Security Copilot into these playbooks, we're not just automating those actions like we made mention, we're starting to automate that intelligence-driven decision-making. So once again, one of those best things about Sentinel playbooks is how approachable they are, even if you're not a developer, as I said. The idea is that you can create a playbook from just a straightforward process, and that starts with defining that trigger. So in this case, the trigger is what kicks off that automation process. So once again, as you can see on the screen, a common trigger could be a new incident has been created, or a specific alert rule is firing off. Or an entity like a user or a host or a device is being flagged. Once you've defined that trigger, you're already often going with your first logic app, which is, always the hardest part is starting point. So that could include potentially, a specific user has been marked as risky, or there has been malicious activity found in the environment. you could obviously use those as an incident being created based on an analytic rule, and you're already off and running. So once you've defined that trigger, you would then want to start to build on top of that. So you could potentially call an API to, I guess, enrich that alert, find out more information about what's happening in that incident specifically, or sending a Teams message to that SOC to let them know that there is automation going on and they should probably jump in and have a bit of a look. And because, with all things automation, you'll be able to log in, you'll be able to see, and if anything, it's probably even helped you out and probably completed a lot of that process for you. And or once again, just creating a ticket for backlogging purposes, for SLA purposes, KPI, all that side of things. But you can build out this via those built-in connectors. So once again, Microsoft connects into all of the Microsoft services, a bunch of third-party tools that I'm sure you're probably using in today in your environment, or even just custom APIs, all through its visual designer. And after, once again, you build out that playbook, you can test it quite safely using sample data to validate that it is working the way you need it to before you then push it into production. So the goal is to automate that repetitive task so that your analysts can once again focus on what matters most, that investigation itself, and then responding to real threats in your environment. So here's, I guess, where the exciting thing starts to come. The actions within your playbook are where Security Copilot really starts to shine. Traditionally, playbooks are mechanical tasks, sending an alert or update a ticket or run this process. But really, with Security Copilot, we can automate like intelligent-driven tasks. So for example, you can say, Copilot, can you please summarize this incident for me? And what that can do, or it can enrich an alert with threat intelligence. So from Defender and Purview, which essentially is of this incident that's come through, what do I need to know about this that I essentially would have to go and manually check? So of this malicious file being, deployed or ran on an environment, where did this file come from? Is this something that went through a communication channel, or is this something that sat in our potentially SharePoint for some time? All of that enriches that alert to kind of give a bit more grounding to an environment, or at least an alert or an incident. And then once again, it can trigger automation through a logic app. So you might be able to have a decision being made. So if all of this is proven 100% that this is malicious, you can then also have actions be taken automatically. So by default, you may not necessarily want to just disable someone willy-nilly, but if Security Copilot says, hey, this actually does look pretty malicious, we probably should look at this a bit more, and just to be safe, we should probably block this, you can then obviously trigger that automation of block, or isolate or send a message automatically without any sort of interaction, or even needing to lift a finger in this case. And that's because it embeds itself into that logic app that you can make this happen automatically. There is no analyst intervention required. It is that seamless. So that essentially means that your SOC can move towards, a hands-off triaging model, where Copilot essentially handles the initial investigation, and then only when it's escalated or when human judgment is required, that the team can come in. So once again, if you're running a bit lean in terms of the SOC team, this can be a really good stepping stone to, kind of clear that noise and get to the point as quickly as possible. Once again, not having to explain it too much, but the results, once again, it's that faster response time, it's that reduced alert fatigue. And then once again, it's that pivot from reactive of, I have to look at this because it's in our environment, to more of a proactive defense. So I've already had something look at this. I know it's not too important. Let's, move towards potentially trying to safeguard our environment so these don't happen in future. Because the unfortunate truth is that Sentinel has raised an incident in your environment that then triggers this SOAR because it's already been seen in your environment. It's already been logged. So the idea is that if you can try and clear the noise, get things through quicker, you can then start to protect so that you potentially don't have to see those logs in future. Now, like any powerful tool, you need to know how Security Copilot works to be able to get its actual true value from it. So you'll hear things like prompt engineering and whatnot. But the idea is that there is a level of prompt engineering that is required in this case. The idea behind that is to really maximize on those benefits, streamline those automations, and really reduce that cost. Analysts should at least be aware of the key steps to be able to do that. Put very simply, using clear, specific prompts. So when Copilot responds, it really does respond best to well-structured questions. So instead of what happened here, you can try summarize this incident involving lateral movement on host X. So that helps Copilot generate a more accurate, relevant response. It's almost like if I said, go over there and pick that up for me. You're not going to know where, you're not going to know what, you're not going to know what's the use of that. I'm not telling you that I would like you to bring it back to me. I'm just giving you a kind of open-ended question. But if I said, go over there, there's a mug on the table, I'd like you to bring it back to me and just place it on that coaster. All of a sudden, I've reduced the amount of kind of straying around that it needs, just giving it a bit more of that well-structured request to be able to then bring back that relevant, actionable response. This in itself will use less SKU because it won't be running around a bit on tangent. You won't have to have subsequent questions to kind of re-clarify what you were trying to, in itself reducing those costs. So what you really want to try and do is focus on those clear, specific prompts, because that's what you're going to want to put in these logic apps. Once again, knowing the capability of Security Copilot is important. So Copilot, once again, can summarize incidents. It can generate KQLs. It can enrich alerts. But what you need to know is, where does that boundary stop? You need to familiar yourself with these features to be able to help yourself actually be able to achieve the goals. So it's not going to be able to go off and do bits and pieces outside of its, I guess, knowledge. It is going to need to be very security focused, but you need to know that prior to really starting to push this into a logic app. Once again, there's also a large amount of integration that comes with it too. So being able to add plugins is to what is referred to, plugins into this. So you would be able to tie in a specific plugin to be able to do a specific function. That in itself is a pretty neat capability. But once again, knowing the tracking and tuning of this to be able to then maximize the amount of benefit to reduce the amount of cost and refine those prompts where the workflows based on outcomes. So once again, having that feedback loop in there as well. So it's not going to, you turn it on, it works the first time. There is a feedback loop that you should be aware of. But once again, that is so that you can get the best, bang for your buck. That's the best return on investment for the SKU that you are investing to be able to use this tool. So, it's ultimately a force multiplier, but like any teammate or anybody starting off in the career, you do need to clearly demonstrate and clearly communicate your expectations for that staff member to be able to actually understand its strengths, to be able to use those to your advantage. So Security Copilot is incredibly powerful. Like, once again, any good AI, you need to give it instructions. So this is that whole effective prompting or prompt engineering. So writing that clear and effective prompt is critical. A well-crafted prompt can help Copilot understand what you want, how to respond, and how to use that data. Once again, this is the core of that logic app. You need to have this worked out, and you need this to be pretty straightforward and repeatable itself. Having too much context into certain things might essentially not work always. So once again, it's pretty straightforward. The what, or the goal. So what are you actually trying to achieve in this case? So, a general example in this case would be summarize this incident for executive reporting. It's going to know that we are summarizing X incident that was generated through your incident. And then you would obviously know the context. So it's for executive reporting. It doesn't want too much technical. It's something that you're going to pass upwards to be able to pass it through to your CISO, for example, just so they're aware that something is going on in your environment, just to keep that communication line well. Once again, you need that context. So what background information does Copilot need? So your prompt in that case would be, this alert is related to a phishing campaign targeted at financial users. So once again, being able to contextualize what it's looking at as best as possible is going to help out. That expectation of what is the output. So, provide a short summary with key indicators or recommended actions, which can there be used for your SOC team post triage to go and just double check things at the end. Or once again, that source. So where is this information being pulled from? So once again, I said, it being pulled from an incident. You could say use Sentinel incident ID 12345 and Defender logging. The idea of this would be able to pull specific information. So including these 4 elements in that, an analyst can essentially use Copilot to deliver accurate, relevant, actionable, and really cost saving, and avoid that, generic fatigue, vague responses that sometimes will come back from Copilot when that isn't applied. And once again, just adding that cost benefit, it does optimize that SKU usage, so it gets you the most value for money as well. Once again, before we go into any deeper, I just want to take a step back and acknowledge that the standalone and the embedded experience does exist. That standalone experience is great for that on-demand investigation. So you essentially will have that ability to ask general questions, generate KQL queries, or explore incidents manually. Once again, on the other side of things, the embedded experience, like what you'd see in Copilot for Defender or in Purview or Entra, you can ask, it already understands the context and brings that intelligence insights right where analysts are already working on it. So the idea here is that where one is investigating on a manual, on a prompted basis, the other one already knows the context. But those themselves are very incredibly useful, especially for analyst-driven workflows. But once again, there are limitations. They do require that manual interaction. They do require that you need to go to the standalone portal or that embedded experience to be able to have something actioned. Once again, they don't scale well for high volume environments. Once again, if you've got 100 incidents streaming into your environment every hour, that probably needs a bit of a tune, but also you've only got so many hands and so much time within a day that you are not scalable. And then once again, they can't be easily standardized. They can't be easily automated. So those in themselves, once again, are the foundations to understanding the capabilities of Security Copilot, but that itself is where that logic app integration comes in. Once again, just trying to bring them up very side by side. The standalone experience is foundational for understanding its capabilities within your environment. So once again, its ability to, fully analyst-driven, flexible, being able to generate question, answer, get responses, see what it can do in terms of its outputs. That itself is where the standalone experience really comes out and starts to shine. It is perfect in that training environment. It's perfect in that testing, or even those one-off investigations that, you're struggling and it's a P1, everything's, on fire. Firing that up and having that single-use investigation to be able to get all that information into one place to be able to provide that executive summary, that's going to save you a lot of time. But once again, it struggles in those high volume environments. You're not going to be wanting to jump into a completely separate portal to go and look at a specific incident because you've already been taken away from the existing portal where your incident was. You have to jump backwards and forwards. It's going to give you a lot of headaches. And really, it's starting to encroach on that time waste. Now, obviously, that's where that embedded experience comes in. That adds that contextual intelligence directly into the areas where you are looking at those incidents. So Defender, or even in areas such as Intune and Purview. But that itself has one of those, probably one of those best value adds, I would say, for those early stage SOC analysts. It's that guided experience as well. So for those not aware as to what guided experience is, it is that helpful, what's next? for a junior analyst, both in investigation and action. So the idea of that is that if you have an incident come through and it says, hey, I think that this is an outcome of the following story, and you should probably go and revoke the user's session so they have to re-authenticate. And you should probably ping them a message on Teams and just say, hey, I just want to double check that you did X, Y, Z. That guided experience essentially gives you that copy pastable Teams message that has that context of this happened with this app at this timestamp. The ability to then give you the keys to be able to say, hey, please click this to revoke the session. Please copy paste this to a message to that staff member to make sure they're going all right. That is where that guided experience comes in and really starts to automate things. But once again, it's reactive. It still requires a human to drive that interaction and is limited to the scope of the platform in its embedded. So once again, if you're in Defender, it's only really going to understand you need to have gone to that incident to fire up that embedded experience and get through there. Once again, that's where that logic app integration comes in. So that's where Copilot becomes automated regardless, or customizable regardless. So it operates 24/7. There is no analyst required for any sort of intervention. It's repeatable, it's scalable, it can be tailored to specific triggers like a high severity incident only, or a specific entity or a specific incident type. So let's say phishing or malware. If you want to think of it almost as agents, right? Before agents were a thing, logic apps were essentially small built processes which you can run over a specific. So if you had a specific process or flow or incident response plan for a phishing, you could have a logic app be a incident response for a phishing. But once again, it's repeatable, it's scalable, and it can have an output, I guess, routed anywhere you need it to. So once again, you can pipe an output into the Sentinel comments section. So once again, in that incident, by the time you come and look at it, it's already done a set of investigation. It said, hey, this is what you need to be aware of. These are the actions you should take. Or, you can have that all put into a Sentinel comment, but then you can also have that sent to you as a message in Teams or emailed to you directly, or entered into your ticketing system, or presented on a dashboard. Once again, through all of those connections that logic apps have, and then the experience of Security Copilot, you can almost wrap them and all those little value and benefits across the board into that logic app. So once again, put simply, the logic app integrates, turns Copilot into like a helpful assistant, into like a fully embedded teammate. One that's always on, one that's always consistent, always does the same process every time. And then it's that alignment back to your SOC strategy or your incident response. So if you're looking to, reduce dwell time, improve consistency, I genuinely believe that the logic app integration and the logic app experience is the most strategic way to future-proof your security environment. So once again, that all makes sense, but let's start looking at how this actually starts to form together. So to get that accurate and useful output in Security Copilot, once again, you need to ground it with the right context. So that's where you start to form that incident-specific variable. So this can be things like entities, so such as a user or a specific host or device or an IP address or a specific application which is involved within that incident. Or let's say a tactic, if I bring up the MITRE, it could be things like initial access or lateral movement or privileged escalation or data exfiltration. That information in itself does feed a lot of information back into Security Copilot to kind of understand what's going on. And then that alert metadata, so that's things like the severity of the Sentinel incident or the source of it or the timestamp or all of its correlation to all the other things that are happening in your environment, or the other alerts and all the other data. So once again, by feeding that into Copilot, either manually or through a playbook, you would be able to have it focus on that specific incident rather than having to give generic or overly broad responses, which then kind of, shooting from the hip, you won't get the best outcome. So that process genuinely in itself, if we're starting to play in that AI space, it's called grounding. So it's anchoring the AI in the right place with the right data so that it can work and reason effectively and efficiently. So when grounding prompts, Copilot can then summarize incidents with precision, generate targeted queries, which then would be used for investigation, and then actually provide you accurate recommendations for relevant actions or post effort requirements based on the tactics that have been observed or the incident that's been observed. So that in itself not only improves that investigation outcome, reduces noise and false positives, but it also then can act as a bit of a learning path as well. So it makes your SOCs more efficient, more understanding as to what's happening within the environment, all automatically without your intervention required. So as you start to integrate Security Copilot into these playbooks, you'll encounter a set of parameters. So that's how Copilot can start to behave, at, I guess, how Copilot interacts and behaves on what it returns. So there's a bunch of parameters. They're all very critical. They define, I guess, the inputs, the context, and importantly, once again, that output. I guess one key parameter that I do want to highlight in these is that evaluation result context. So you'll see it in the bottom prompt there under inputs. The idea is that that is essentially the output payload that Security Copilot responds to. So if you put in a question, Security Copilot responds. That is the evaluation result context. So the idea of that is that that is your summarized, your output, your enriched, that's the information that you want to see. So once again, that might contain the KQL query that was used, or the natural language summary of that incident, or the list of, I guess, recommendations or actions that you should take, or even just the enriched threat intelligence that you needed that context to be a bit more aware of in that space. So once again, this can be the pass, either passed straight to a comment or straight to an output, or it can be passed on to subsequent steps within that. So, for example, to send a Teams message, create a ticket or incident, trigger an incident, you could say, please output either a yes or a no, or a true or a false as to how panicky should I be about this. You would then be able to say, if the evaluation result context in this case is X or Y, you would then be able to have subsequent actions occur automatically. So once again, understanding how it's captured and the use of these outputs specifically helps build that intelligent automation in itself. So once again, just like any API or logical flow, the structure, the formatting of that output matters the most. So especially when you're starting to chain it together in these automations. Once Security Copilot then generates that output for you, that's where the summaries, the queries, or the recommendations start to come into play. So, a few practical examples, as I've said, is automatically commenting information into that Sentinel incident. So, you could say, use Copilot to summarize, automatically add a comment to that Sentinel incident. So the idea is before you even see, what you're looking at, you'd be able to see, the following incident overview is XYZ. It's this tactic, it's this information. These are the people involved. That in itself starts to almost be like a grounding or a helper analyst, whether they're, fully experienced in their space or not so experienced, be able to ground that information. You'd be able to create tasks, for example. So based on recommendations, you can automatically generate a set of tasks in your Sentinel or ITSM system. So, investigate the following or review users' access for Y. So once again, if you want some tasks to be completed by an analyst, you can have them be a task. Once again, as mentioned, you'd be able to notify via Teams or send a third-party integration to a custom API here, or a ticketing system over there. But the idea is that some of that third-party integration starts to really loop into it, which makes it really, really powerful and really, really helpful. So taking a moment, once again, the incident triage, it's the reviewing of alerts, identifying those false positives, the alert enrichment, pulling in that threat intelligence, which obviously Security Copilot has a large, database of information, which technically you would have to pay for if you weren't using Security Copilot. That's all in there. That's all something you get as a benefit. And all of a sudden that automated response, so, disable this, isolate this, communicate with these channels, all of those to date, manual, repetitive, time consuming, often requiring multiple humans, multiple judgment calls, multiple tools. But then all of a sudden, Sentinel SOAR and Security Copilot, you start to automate those things intelligently. It's action driven. So Copilot doesn't just execute them. It helps you make decisions. It helps you bring in context. It helps you bring those threats and historical patterns together, meaning faster responses, reduce fatigue. And most importantly, it allows for your team to start to focus once again on what matters most. Once again, just trying to go through the end-to-end process, just so everybody's aware. This is, I guess, what I would call the stop. Take some screenshots so you're aware as to how to do this. So once again, creating that playbook. So once again, design that logic app. So define the action that you would want to occur. So whether it's enrichment or summarization or notification or remediation. You then define that trigger. So once again, it's that incident based. So like when a new incident is created or updated, alert based, such as a specific alert being seen, or entity based. So, this specific user, it could be a CEO, device, could be a specific server or set of servers, or an IP, something that's not seen very commonly. And then obviously you'd be able to configure automation rules. So like, when does this run? So only on that new incident, or only on a P1 or a high severity, or only if the incident contains a specific incident, or specific entity in this case. So once again, it allows you to get that granular control in place to be able to do that. So once you've created that playbook, you're in a logic app. It's pretty much ready to go. It's got that trigger ready to go. You'd then want your next prompt. So once again, you need to ground that prompt. So things like the subscription ID, resource group name, the Sentinel workspace, and the Sentinel ID of the incident. Once again, there can be variables from that trigger. So the idea is that you don't have to have one for every single incident. It would be able to get that information. So then you'd be able to utilize things like Copilot's enrichment of alerts, threat intelligence, summarize this, generate this, provide queries for this, or even just, recommend the following next steps for me. And then once again, you need to define that output. So, comment here, Teams message over here, push it into a ticketing system over here. The idea of that is that you want to be able to have actionable and visible insights to the right people, right time, before you even touch it, so that you can get the best output, best value for money, and really the best speed, because if there's an incident occurring in your environment, speed is crucial. So just like that, you've built it from automation, you've built the trigger, you've built the responses, and just like that, you've been able to combine Microsoft Sentinel, Logic App and a Playbook, and Security Copilot end to end. So you're not just automating tasks, you're automating decisions, and that's a huge step towards any security operations center. Once again, so behind the curtains, I'm just going to literally give you an incident to start from. So taking information from the presentation and how that can be put together. So once again, this is completely hypothetical. This will incur a cost if you were to build this in your environment, as I said, and you will need to get all those approvals. Once again, this is hypothetical, but hypothetically, there's a high risk incident in your environment. It's been flagged. It's pretty much drop tools. You need to respond to this incident now. Previously, that would all be manual, but you could trigger an automated playbook in this case that correlates all that information to provide you essentially what would potentially be hours and hours of investigation before you even get to open it. So, looking here, I've got my Sentinel prompt, my prompt contents, which grounds that source. So it says, this is the incident subscription ID. This is the resource group, the workspace name, and the ID of it. And then in simple, I just want, the details about the Sentinel incident. Include that information that related to entities involved. So that's that enrichment. And then I want you to correlate the information across Sentinel, which is in logs, and then what Defender could see. Once again, just trying to collapse all of the data, really source specific, to be able to ground that information. Then you'd be able to then go into subsequent prompts. So you'd be able to have some things like if a prompt had a host entity associated, please provide me information about that. So that could potentially then pivot off to Defender for Endpoint or Defender for Cloud Apps or Microsoft Intune or even Purview in this case. So that can help you determine aspects of lateral movement or any actions on that host that may be usable. So, they looked over here, they downloaded things over here, they ran things over here, and then they, tried to email some information out. So then I'd be able to potentially ask what processes. So, of that thing they ran, was it PowerShell? Was it something potentially malicious? Being able to then essentially pivot that to run through that, you'll be able to determine if there is any malicious activities being completed. Once again, before the incident, or even potentially before you even get to see the incident within its Sentinel. So that once again, that can help you determine things like malware, ransomware, or even something, just as sinister brewing in your environment. Once again, you'd be able to then start to compose things together. That's your ability to pull information which we've pulled from those prompts, such as the incident account analysis, device analysis, and process analyst, as well as all those other things like this is the incident title, this is the description of that incident, this is the severity, this is the tactic. Being able to compose all of that information together as one little capsule, we'll call it, to be able to then provide all the information for your investigation to better ensure that the information is collected than assuming. So I would like to think that it would have grabbed the tactic, known that, or the incident title. But it's better not to assume in these cases. We do want it to grab all the information that we have at our disposal to be able to put that together. And then once again, just, finally, that summarize that output. So I can see there, I've got here is the Sentinel investigation details which you've provided. Then the compose. The idea of the output is that's everything that Security Copilot said. It's all that additional information. But what I've essentially then asked is, please only show me the relative information related to the incident to be able to aid in this further investigation. So act as that triage process for the SOC. So, perform another investigation if need be, and then provide the following output in order. So once again, that overview, description, what's involved, why it's involved, possible mitigation steps, if you've got those recommendations, or conclusions, or something like an executive summary. And then right down the bottom, I've got, please format the context for a Sentinel comment. So as the output will be used to update that incident with a comment in Microsoft Sentinel. So once again, you have the ability to play around with this. I personally think that I've had the most success with things like output as JSON or output as Markdown. But I've even had a lot of success in output as HTML if I was to have it as an email, for example. So once again, playing with that, getting to know the understanding and capabilities of that is important. But really, what that's done from end to end is I can put all of that information, grab the output from that, and then output the following into a Sentinel incident comment. So before you even look at the incident, all of that's done. Once again, you can even make changes to the incident itself. So setting the incident as active from new shows that it's had some actions applied to it, so that you'd be able to even know where that action has come from. And in this case, it would be Security Copilot. That in itself, once again, I guess the amazing part is that all of this can potentially be done out of hours, or, when you're not even looking at it, potentially even hours of investigation, of enrichment, collecting all that evidence, composing, I guess, a story, a timeline of events that have occurred into a set of recommendations to either remediate or eradicate the threat from the environment before a staff member even has the time to look at that incident. So if I was to tell you that an average time for a malicious actor to come in and take over your entire environment was, just over an hour, this time save alone on high severity incidents really starts to show that capability behind Sentinel, SOAR components, and Security Copilot when it is embedded into that whole tool set. Now, I'm not going to go too into deep about other ones, but what I would really like to show is, it is a brief screenshot, but this is a Sentinel incident investigation triage that's been kindly placed into GitHub, which, explaining it very simply, has a condition of, for every single entity that is involved, be it an IP an account or user, a host, or like a device or a server, or even a process like that. Once again, that executable that could be ran, the ability to have a specific, very built prompt for that, and then once again compose that output. In this case, I can see that the IP address actually is ran through the plugin AbuseDB-IP, which then will go and look at a plugin which purposely is built to go and look for specific functions in an IP address. So once again, being able to have specific built, purpose-built outcomes or specific prompts for specific things to be able to then round out, say, of the following, please perform an investigation. This is everything. Once again, if you had an incident with 100 IP addresses, that's 100 manual checks of every single IP that you would have to do. That in itself could genuinely take days. In this case, it literally could take minutes, even before you even get to look at it. So once again, highly recommend you go and look in GitHub repos. Often they have how to deploy, what's the context, what's the environment, what should you know. They're genuinely a gold mine and also a really good starting point for beginners or even just advanced users themselves. Knowing that I'm running very low on time, I do want to conclude here. So yeah, look, the idea is that what we've seen today is essentially Microsoft Sentinel. And when it's combined with SOAR, that security orchestration automation response, and that security copilot, intelligence, you can start to really build out those platforms for modern security operations. So it enables you then to be able to automate repetitive tasks or even time-consuming tasks. It can help automate enrichment of alerts with threat intelligence, which obviously is the Microsoft backend platform, or even just accelerating that triage and response. But once again, most importantly, it empowers analysts to actually focus on what matters most, which is proactive, stopping these things from occurring before they occur. So once again, if you're just starting off in your automation journey, looking to scale your existing environment, start wanting to be able to do more with less, all of that, I do believe that Security Copilot offers that flexibility, that intelligence, that scalability, and that way to actually enhance your SOC without absolutely breaking the bank. So once again, I do hope that you do, have some takeaways from this. I do hope that you were able to get some insights from this, whether it is the building or the integration, or even how to just optimize those capabilities for your context. Even if you are greenfields or absolutely new to this or fully automated, I do hope this was something that you were able to learn from today. I do thank you for your time. I'd love to hear your thoughts. We do have a couple more minutes for this, but genuinely, I'd love to see what you guys build. So if you do build something, be happy to look at it. I'd be happy to, show where I'd potentially add value, but I'd love to see people build something from this. But absolutely, thank you for your time. And that's me. I'll send it back to Pooya.
I think it was a great information and session that you provided. So maybe two questions. The first one is about what metrics should SOC teams tracking to measure the success of automation with Sentinel and Copilot? Is that still that MTTD and TTR that we had before as a measurement of the metrics for the SOC team? Or is that any extra things that you feel needs to be involved as part of the measuring the success of using the AI in the SOC?
So I'd say, that MTTR, like that response, that resolution side of things, absolutely. I think when you are, let's say you're an MSSP, you're a SOC 24/7 operation, your MTTR, like the response or even just the resolution itself, that is essentially what you're being graded on. Now, and when I say graded, I just mean that's what I guess your company or that's what your expectation is. So I guess where this starts to come into a value is that of your response, be it that triage process, you can almost guarantee, I say a bit tongue in cheek, but you can almost guarantee that you will always hit your response target due to the fact that you will have something essentially be that triage for you. Now, I'm not saying this just alleviates and completely takes it away. It's completely, we'll never miss this again. Obviously, having it run over every single incident in every single case is going to start to cost money for your environment. So you're going to pay for it. But it really is that MTTR, that resolution that we're trying to improve here. It is that we are bringing all this information is, it's not going to replace your team. It really is just, here's all the information we've been able to collate. This is the most cost-effective way to get all that information in a timely manner. Please go and action the following outcomes to then be able to meet that response time.
No, it's spot on. I think you see your human should be in that loop of any AI systems coming to that place, regardless of the cyber or any AI platforms which is transforming its business processes. I'm completely agree. The human in the loop is very important. So maybe a couple of questions from Pablo, which I'm bringing up the screen one by one.
Brilliant.
So here you go. The first one, what can be monitored and detected in relation with AI agents? Testing them is complex. I guess security too. Could you provide some examples, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess what can be monitored and detected in regards to AI agents? So obviously this is kind of a pivot. Good thing I'm kind of one of those jack of all trades. So in terms of the AI agents, especially this is where that Microsoft purview comes into it. And all of a sudden you probably heard all these things like DSPM for AI or that data security posture management for AI. The idea is what can be seen in that space is really based on what you can deploy in that space too. So example is that if you have agents being built in your environment, obviously that's the context of something like Copilot Studio, obviously knowing those agents. But if you want to start looking at third party, obviously then you need to start enabling things like browser extensions to be able to look at that telemetry. So once again, being able to pull in that telemetry through Purview or DSPM for AI then allows that information to be logged. And then once again, that itself is that threat intelligence to be able to then look towards those other AI agents, what's happening. So when I made the example of this user downloaded this file and they did this thing and they did that, that is the telemetry of, and they went and chucked all this information into, unsanctioned AI application A, which happened to be an open source generative learning model that has just eaten up all your data. So obviously, once again, it starts to swing in that purview. The more telemetry you can bring in, the better. But once again, being able to specifically guide that security copilot prompt to say, I would like you to go and look over here now for this information is going to get you the best value.
I think you're spot on. I think it's two parts of that. As you mentioned, we had the shadow IT before. Now we have a shadow of AI. So we definitely in the Microsoft landscape, we have that, as you mentioned, Microsoft Purview for DSPM for AI, and also the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps to monitor the sanctioned and unsanctioned apps. That's a great point that you mentioned. On the other side, I would say when using AI agents, especially what were not developed by those vendors and developed customized inside of your business, of course, all of those elements of the responsible AI, which is involving the security, is going to be actually playing an important role, especially about the data governance and security when we're talking about the using AI in any form, accessing the data sources that you get connected to the AI systems. Completely agree with what you said. Maybe the second question from Pablo again is saying, what other Microsoft tools do you think are needed to be able to use Sentinel effectively?
So I guess when you say Microsoft tools, I am going to assume that you are referring to the Microsoft stack, be it security. And I'll bring it back to, I guess, my Defender knowledge is that the more Microsoft tools that you're using within the stack, the better that tool is going to do end to end. So the idea is that, I guess, no different to Puya just mentioned, right? You've got Purview over here that's going to look at the compliance, the communication, your ins and outs of specific AI usage. And then also then he's mentioned Defender for Cloud Apps, which is the, the SaaS-based, I guess, side. That in itself is purely more, very SaaS focused. But all of a sudden, then you want to start looking at Defender for Identity. That could be something like more of your lateral movement. You've got a bit of a hybrid environment. You're still running an on-prem AD or Active Directory, and you've got a bit of a cloud space. And something could actually occur within that AD. Somebody's been given domain privileged access into an environment and they've logged in across 20 different servers without your knowledge. That's where Defender for Identity is going to come into it. All of a sudden, you've got Defender for Endpoints. That's starting to look at what's happening on those endpoints themselves. Defender for Office 365 all of a sudden starts to look at those communication channels. That in itself, if you only have a couple of the pieces of the puzzle, we'll call it, it's going to start to, try to not make up stories, but it's not going to be able to have that full, well-rounded, I guess, understanding as to the whole context. Once again, if you want to start bringing in the whole attack disruption, if Microsoft and all of its TI and its machine learning is almost guaranteed that that is something bad happening in your environment, that will take action. But once again, if you don't give it all of that context, give it all of that information, itself is going to fall over. That in itself is no different to the use of Security Copilot. Once again, it's what information can you provide it to be able to give itself that well-rounded to best give you that outcome. I don't want to say use all of it, but the more information you give to it, the more you're going to get out of it.
No, yeah, exactly right. So as you mentioned, I think Microsoft ecosystem in the cyberspace. So that's pretty much depends on what cyber domains that you're looking for, to what Microsoft tools we're going to use. If you're talking about IT and access management, if you're talking about the data domain, if you're talking about the network security specifically, or cloud infrastructure, all definitely hand in hand, providing that the best capability when it's combined with the Sentinel as a SIEM solution. Spot on. So probably the next question, again, from Buffalo, great questions. So are security tools, executions, and data logs located in the region of the tenant? Or, for example, it could happen that anything happens outside of the Europe. I'm assuming Buffalo is from Europe.
Yeah, so I think the security tool execution and data logging located in the region of the tenant. So the idea is where this data logs itself in the context of Sentinel is a log analytics workspace. So in this case, you would deploy an Azure resource, be it a log analytics workspace, and you would set that region. So no different to if you were going to deploy a virtual machine or an app service, or list all other resource groups / Azure resources. You would obviously host that log analytics workspace in the region that is best for your region or your requirements. So if you had a global company, let's say, and you had branches in Australia, you had branches in Europe, and you had branches in XYZ location, you'd be able to then also, have specific log analytics workspaces for those regions, for those branches. That obviously in itself can almost be a cost reduction if you are, only starting up in a specific area and you have retention requirements that sit over here, but not so much over there. I do believe that Europe do have a lot more stricter requirements than Australia. So I would say that you likely would have a lot more requirements for, your location of your data. Obviously, Australia does as well, but I know that there are different areas and different requirements across the board, which you would then be able to kind of separate and specify specifically for your, geo region in this case. But I think the other part of this, for example, it could happen to anything outside of Europe. So I think that's where, that's almost a two-parter, is that where you are piping that information in from is dependent on where you're piping that information from. So if you do have specific hardware and software that is, housed or used within the Australian region, and you do need to have that piped into a Australia logging system, you would then stand up an Azure based log analytics workspace in that region to be able to pipe that information in. So once again, it's depending on where you set that up is the most important part. Sorry, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's answered the question. And on top of what you mentioned, I would say, except of that you mentioned some of the services like log analytics workspace with SIEM Sentinel and those type of things. When you are deploying them, is going to actually specifying which region that you want to deploy. But the other side of it, another view from my perspective is some of the services in Microsoft, when you said Microsoft tools like Azure AD or Intra, which is they are not non-regional type of services. It could actually keep some of the logs before you are centralizing them in the log analysis, keeping some other places because of the non-regional type of actually services. That could be keeping some of the logs in other states. But I know that Microsoft normally look at that where you are actually deploying your tenant mainly and keep it in that region, not specifically in that specific country, but is in that region of the Europe to make sure it's still meeting those requirements of the GDPR and all of those things that we are expecting to see. But yeah, I think that was great. And probably the last question, in here is, I understand the costs are variable, but could you estimate the monthly cost of using Sentinel and other associated Microsoft tools for the 10 to the very, very hard question to answer, but as you said, it depends.
Yeah, look, costs are variable. Look, I think it comes back to, I guess, the licensing, right? Licensing is going to always be the biggest, I guess, kicker. If you're talking about a business premium environment, be it, you've got all the tools, you're kind of using some of these tools like the, Defender and the Intunes and whatnot through the business premium. That's kind of, what I would say is your base to kind of get a breadth of everything happening. The cost of using Sentinel on top of that is going to be like, what are you using in these environments? As Poy's mentioned, are you doing things through Entra? Are you hybrid? Do you want to bring in that information from your on-premises through services such as Defender for Identity? Do you want to look at your communication channels through Defender for Office 365? All of these are almost certain are a part of Business Premium. You also can get E5 as an add-on for E5 security on top of Business Premium as of recently. So if you are starting to really want to get the advanced side of security in the Microsoft stack for a 10 to 20 person, organization, that is a capability now. It is quite potentially the most cost effective way for a 10 to 20 employee company to get the best of the best in security. But then once again, it's what do you want to bring into Sentinel? So Sentinel and the log analytics workspace is where the costing is occurring. So it's based on how much data you're ingesting. So the idea is that if you don't have a lot of activity in your cloud space and you're only really ingesting, a handful of things, bits and pieces over here and over there, it won't cost you much, to be completely honest. It will be what you are ingesting. So if you are choosing to only log specific events or specific, you just want to log, just sign-ins and activity within your Azure, we'll call it. Microsoft even has a set of, data ingestion that they actually will give you for free as well. So almost a starting point, no cost, to just get you in there and actually using the tool, but also, they're just as much trying to help make sure that you're secure just as much. They're trying to meet you where you are. So if I was to say, if we're leaving licensing completely out the picture, I can go through and say, E5, you get a bunch of ingestion based on how many licenses. So if you've got 20 licenses, I believe it is that you get, call it, 5 meg free per day per user by having XYZ licensing. So if we want to write all of those out, I think per gig it is, and I'll say it in AU because that's where I am, I think it's $4.50 AUD per gig. Now that in itself is kind of, once again, it's a very hard one to picture, but if I was to say that a small company with not a lot of telemetry probably won't touch many a gig in terms of ingestion, if each log is, bytes, we'll call it, it won't be touching the sides really, and it really will start to source all that central information of that. You'll start ticking all those compliance boxes that require your logging, and also they give you 90 days free for retention too, so you don't even have to worry too much in that space.
Yeah, that's spot on. I think, as you mentioned, it's very consumption based, and it's very dependent on what you're getting connected or integrating with Sentinel to receive the log from. Of course, some of the organization, even these small organizations, they are unnecessarily ingesting a huge amount of the logs, which not necessarily required for the alerting and doesn't have that context for the alerting and security incident and event generation. So that's very important to be smart when you're actually integrating what logs as part of, DCR or data collection rules that you are creating, what type of logs you are bringing to the platform to make it sure you are reducing the cost at the same time you are actually identifying and detecting the right incidents for your organization. But some of the services like a Security Copilot that you mentioned and this, I'm assuming they are much easier to cost, and it is more based on that because as you said, security compute unit per hour. So that's much easier to say how much does it cost. So it's what $6 USD in Australia East again region for 1 hour per hour actually for the one SCU, which is of course multiple analysts. It depends on what type of the workloads and what questions or what prompts they are sending. As you said, prompt engineering is one of those important things, as you mentioned. It's very important, the context of the prompt that you're sending. And I'm assuming security analysts just changing the role of the security analyst. They're not going to actually just, as you said, go to different platforms to find out the information they need. Instead, they need to develop the skills of the prompt, how to send the prompt to get the accurate answer back, which was great, actually, what you covered as part of the session. Awesome. I think was the last questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining to this session. Anthony, thanks for your informative session. I think it was a great session, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with everyone in the community.
No, once again, I appreciate you having me on. As I said, I love what you're doing. Keep it up. And yeah, thank you for the time.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Catch you later.